Hey there, history enthusiasts and curious minds. Welcome back to our captivating journey through the annals of time. Today, we're diving into a chilling chapter of World War II history that will leave you both astonished and haunted. Brace yourselves as we unravel the enigma of the notorious Buchenwald bitch. This infamous figure emerged from the shadows of a Nazi concentration camp, shrouded in mystery and darkness. Get ready to witness the indomitable spirit of survival and the stark reality of human strength and cruelty. Step into the dark corridors of Buchenwald, where Ilse Koch, the wicked enchantress of the concentration camp, held sway alongside her husband during the chilling days of the Holocaust. With a cruel flick of her wrist, she commanded the execution of prisoners, reveling in the twisted theater of torture and murder. But her thirst for power didn't stop there. Oh no. Her dwelling, a macabre sanctuary, housed chilling keepsakes meticulously crafted from the very skin of her victims. Ilse Koch, a name that sends shivers down the spine, holds the dubious honor of potentially bearing responsibility for more deaths than your average serial killer, truly earning her place among the most malevolent women in the annals of history. The early life of Ilse Koch. Let's rewind the clock and journey back to the humble beginnings of Margaret Ilse Koch in the vibrant city of Dresden, Germany. From an early age, she seemed like an ordinary girl, basking in the warmth of a modest upbringing. In the eyes of her neighbors, she was the epitome of friendliness and cheer, basking in the glory of popularity during her school years. With her father toiling away as a laborer and her mother tending to the household, Ilse learned the domestic arts of cooking, cleaning, and managing a home, just like any other German girl. But life had other plans for her. At the tender age of 15, she bid adieu to her school days and embarked on a full-time job at a cigarette factory. Determined to carve a brighter future, she simultaneously enrolled in accounting classes at a local college, honing her skills as a bookkeeper. Little did she know that her path would intersect with the rise of the Nazi Party and that her life would take an unexpected turn. Driven by the throes of economic hardship and an unyielding thirst for change, Ilse found solace in the promises of the Nazis, the saviors who vowed to lift Germany from the depths of post-World War I despair. In the eyes of the economically disadvantaged and the educationally deprived, fascism appeared as a beacon of hope and a solution to the nation's woes. As a result, Ilse succumbed to the seductive allure of the Aryan master race and adopted their odious anti-Semitic sentiments along the way. It was during this time that she encountered Karl Koch, a man who shared her beliefs. Karl, 9 years her senior and previously divorced due to his ex-wife's opposition to Nazi philosophies, had a criminal record for theft. He and his brother had also worked as police informants. Surprisingly, this life of crime held an allure for both Ilse and Karl, leading to their marriage in 1936. With Hitler's rise to power, the couple was rewarded for their early allegiance to Nazism. Karl, formerly a petty criminal, was granted a high-ranking position as an SS officer. The sudden opportunity for wealth and influence, which they had never experienced before, enticed them to make the most of their newfound status. Kochs in Buchenwald. Karl Koch was the warden of a Berlin prison before he was given command of a concentration camp. He would make inmates eat from bowls and sleep in doghouses. When Koch was around, they were instructed to kneel and bark. They were beaten if they refused to cooperate. Hot tar was traditionally used as a form of punishment for male offenders. The Nazis took note of his sadistic torture methods and decided to put him in charge of a concentration camp full of the Third Reich's enemies. The fact that Ilse Koch married a man with a reputation for brutality didn't deter her. Indeed, she found it to be quite enjoyable, and she desired participation in the action just as much as her husband did. When she learned that she would be working with him in a concentration camp, she even worked at the infamous Sachsenhausen concentration camp to hone her skills. It wasn't just the concentration camps under Karl and Ilse Koch's supervision at Buchenwald. They were present during its construction, and the camp's entrances bore the inscription, "Jedem das Seine," each his own. This is code for everyone gets what's coming to them. This was their unique way of rubbing it in the faces of those they considered deserving of less respect. Buchenwald was the largest of the Nazi concentration camps, yet it lacked gas chambers for the efficient and quick elimination of prisoners. For much longer than other concentration camps, prisoners in Buchenwald were allowed to survive thanks to the camp's primary function, to serve as slave labor, producing items that were useful to the Third Reich. The average lifespan was only 3 to 4 months in Auschwitz. Ilse insisted that her family live in a mansion on the site of the concentration camp while it was being constructed. Men and women in Nazi Germany were assigned distinct responsibilities. The ideal German wife was one who cheerfully did her share of household chores, who never gave in to defeat, and who was completely devoted to her husband. Leaders at the highest levels of the Nazi Party were held to this standard. It was expected less of the wives of SS officers than of ordinary German women. However, Ilse Koch went all out with her newfound affluence. She aspires to a life free of domestic duties. She made the decision to use concentration camp inmates as slaves. She insisted that everyone refer to her as gnädige Frau, a term typically reserved for aristocratic women. When Ilse Koch became so bored with her life that she decided the inmates should construct an indoor sports arena fit for the Olympics, she did nothing to help. The sole purpose of this was to facilitate her equestrian pursuits. It cost over 200,000 Reichsmarks to construct. She spent what, in today's dollars, would be close to $1 million. But even that couldn't cure her boredom. Any inmate who so much as glanced at the commander's wife was to be executed immediately. Ilse Koch, aware of this, intentionally begins to dress provocatively. She constantly exposed her breasts by wearing skin-tight clothing. The wives of SS officers and other camp personnel rarely interacted with the inmates, suggesting that they were largely oblivious to the atrocities being committed around them. However, Ilse Koch was eager to help, and she took pleasure in the fact that starvation and death were rampant around her. Redhead Ilse was svelte and self-confident. According to eyewitnesses, when Ilse Koch's husband was away, she would issue orders to the officers to bring out a group of male soldiers and have them stripped down to nothing. She would undress to her undergarments and bare all in front of the sex-deprived male inmates. If any of them so much as looked at her body or became uncontrollably aroused, the guards would seize them and shoot them in the head. She wanted teenage boys to be her housekeepers on purpose. According to the household staff, she frequently had breakfast delivered to her bed while she was still dressed only in her nightgown. They would be killed just like the men in the yard were if they looked at her corpse. She might have aroused some of them even if they hated her to death because, well, they were teenage boys. If these tales are to be believed, she must have been a sexual sadist who found pleasure in seeing others suffer. Arik Hirsch, who worked as one of her household servants, was only 15 years old. On the outskirts of the camps, he claimed, was the Koch family compound. And so, from his window, he could see the free people who lived beyond the fence. He often felt envy and sadness as he watched other people go about their lives and wondered why he wasn't given the same opportunities. Every Sunday, Ilse Koch gave him permission to eat 2 boiled potatoes. He was going to bring them back to the cell block where the rest of the inmates were staying. He would peel the potatoes and then throw the skins away because he didn't like eating them. However, after he did that, several other prisoners, also starving, jumped on the peels. Barbaric experiments at Buchenwald. Within the walls of Buchenwald, the Nazi regime's twisted experiments reached unfathomable depths. Doctors at the camp injected homosexuals with concoctions thought to turn them straight and poisoned others with deadly chemicals to find potential antidotes. Eventually, Ilse's boredom could no longer be alleviated through teasing, and she began demanding uninterrupted viewing of the doctor's experiments. She took this as a chance to try out a brand new pastime. As she rode through the camp on her horse, she saw that many of the inmates were covered in intricate tattoos. She went up to Erich Wagner, one of the camp's physicians, and suggested they investigate whether or not tattoos were associated with violent or criminal behavior. Now, we all know that the answer should have been a resounding no. But alas, rules and ethics meant nothing to our manipulative protagonist. And so the stage was set for a series of grotesque experiments. Lives were extinguished and bodies dissected, all for the sake of Ilse's insidious obsession. But how did she coax the prisoners into submission? She rode her horse through the camp, bellowing orders that pierced the air. The men, compelled by fear, were forced to strip, exposing their vulnerable selves to her scrutinizing gaze. The sinister deeds of Ilse Koch made her the mastermind of sadistic curiosity. You see, Ilse grew tired of her usual games and teasing, craving something more exhilarating. And so she set her sights on the doctor's experiments, seeking a front-row seat to their macabre proceedings. But that wasn't enough for our wicked protagonist. No, she had a diabolical plan brewing in that twisted mind of hers. Those with the most striking tattoos were not simply admired from afar. Oh no, they were singled out for a deadly medical experiment. Can you believe the audacity? Their skin, my friends, was transformed into the most grotesque of trinkets, lampshades, knife sheaths, and even book covers. She commanded a group of Jewish inmates to produce a vast quantity of these ghastly human leather trinkets, all in time for Christmas. Yes, you heard that right. Her twisted mind saw fit to spread her grotesque handiwork as holiday gifts to the SS officers in charge of other camps. According to rumors, Ilse outfitted her home with switches made out of human body parts that she could operate with her own thumbs. The depths of her depravity knew no bounds. Inmates who helped out around the house claimed that Ilse had affairs with both Dr. Waldemar Hoven and Deputy Commandant Hermann Florstedt. She reportedly spent the night at Dr. Hoven's house whenever Karl Koch was sent away from the camp to perform his Nazi duties. He was the perfect match for her because of his reputation for performing medical experiments on human subjects. Karl Koch, who had contracted syphilis, had the orderly who had given him the diagnosis executed. He hoped no one would find out the unpleasant truth about their marriage. Many people assumed they were sexually active together. The trial and revelations, the Koch's crimes and Ilse's manipulations. After all their heinous acts, it was finally time for these two to face the music in court back in 1942. But here's the kicker. What took the Nazis so darn long to question the origins of those ill-gotten funds that fueled Ilse's lavish lifestyle and even built her own horse stadium? I mean, seriously, you'd think they'd have caught on sooner. The Kochs were masters of deception, concocting human experiments on the fly at Buchenwald. They'd just make them up as they went along, without a care in the world. It was strictly forbidden, and only a directive from the highest levels of the Nazi Party could have started a scientific trial. But these twisted souls saw it as an opportunity to further their wicked agenda. Humans were often used as test subjects in medical studies because doing so would benefit the Third Reich. Typical examples of such experiments include establishing that Aryans were superior, or that the disabled were less than humans. They'd use these experiments as a cover for their genocidal atrocities, all while twisting the very concept of science to suit their wicked desires. But here's where Ilse's manipulations truly come to light. She had a way of controlling the men in her life, bending them to her will without a second thought. She didn't hesitate to ruin their professional lives just to get what she wanted. Take Dr. Wagner, for example. She played him like a fiddle, persuading him to break protocol and go against everything he knew. It's a testament to her power over those around her. The fate of Karl Koch, judgment and execution. After the previous leader of Buchenwald was removed from office, a man named Hermann Pister assumed control. Both Ilse and her husband, Karl, ended up in jail while they awaited trial. The Kochs were required to appear in court in 1944. No matter how manipulative Ilse was, the Nazi judge found that the ultimate blame should be placed on Karl. After all, he was the leader and should have had the final say on how people were killed in the camp and how money was spent. The judge dropped all charges and released Ilse, and she was finally free to leave. But Karl did not fare so well. Her demands led directly to her husband's conviction and execution by firing squad in 1945, but she showed no remorse and continued to live a normal life in Germany with her 3 children. Buchenwald's liberation and the horrors uncovered. In the same year, American forces liberated the prisoners at Buchenwald. They invited the locals of Weimar, Germany, to come inside and see what had been going on in the camp next door. They discovered 80,000 people jammed into a room built for 8,000. The area outside the crematorium was littered with dead bodies. The American troops came across a macabre collection of human remains, including several organs in glass cases. There were decapitated bodies and human skin wrapped around everyday objects. Ilse Koch's trial. Incomplete evidence and controversial testimonies. After hearing testimony from former Buchenwald inmates, the Allies placed Ilse Koch under arrest for crimes against humanity based on what they learned. Ilse testified at her trial that the items in question were actually crafted from goatskin, but many of them were actually inked up. Furthermore, a group of Jewish inmates who had been forced to work at the camp testified that it was their job to butcher human bodies and skin to make these souvenirs at Ilse's request. Despite the abundance of photographic evidence demonstrating the reality of these things, no evidence suggests Ilse Koch had anything to do with the production of these items. Only the testimonies of witnesses were available, and those were disregarded as hearsay. In 1947, she gave birth to a son while incarcerated and was later forced to give him up because she was pregnant as a result of an affair with a German inmate. Multiple trials and life sentence. Ilse's last stand for freedom. General Lucius D. Clay, the U.S. military governor, decided there wasn't enough evidence to execute her because of this. Instead of jail time, he gave her 4 years of hard labor, which she dutifully performed. West Germany, however, had not finished with her just yet. She was immediately put on trial for her crimes for the third and final time, as soon as she was released from prison and was given a life sentence. The same doctor, Dr. Morgan, testified in all 3 of Ilse Koch's trials. So the rumor goes. He went on to tell the New York Times she was a hussy who rode horseback and wore sexy underwear in front of the prisoners and then noted down for punishment the numbers of those who looked at her. She lay around in her garden in front of prisoners, simply primitive. But she had nothing to do with the lampshade business, and she did not deserve such draconian punishment. She was a victim of horror stories. Keep in mind that that was the person who was supposed to be defending her character. During her lifetime, Ilse Koch gave birth to 4 children. In the camp, she gave birth to 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. Although her children were too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation, AS.Venturer Koch committed suicide after discovering how much the world despised the Koch family. Her daughters were able to find partners, adopt new surnames, and start new chapters in their lives. Uwe Kohler's struggle, a son's belief in his mother's innocence. Uwe Kohler was the name of her son, whom she had to give up. He never had a permanent home because he was constantly moved between foster care facilities. He was 19 and working as an insurance salesman when he made the decision to look into his family history. The birth certificate was in his possession. He learned his mother's identity and followed the news of her trial. After gathering his nerve, he went to see them while they were incarcerated. She expressed extreme joy at seeing him. Since her eldest son had died and her daughters had grown distant, she rarely, if ever, had any visitors. Ilse assured Uwe that all the rumors about her were false. He reasoned that she probably wasn't blameless because she had worked at a concentration camp. However, he loved his mother without conditions and desperately wanted to reconnect with her. He began visiting once a month. Uwe Kohler always seemed more interested in his mother as a person than in hearing about her experiences during World War II, so he never pressed her for details. A few of these trips convinced him that his mother was innocent and that she would never do anything so terrible. There was nothing she could say or do to persuade him to hire a lawyer and release her. In 1967, she had already lived to be 61 years old. After failing to manipulate anyone else, she saw in Uwe her last and best chance at getting what she wanted. In an attempt to end her misery, she hung herself in her jail cell by the sheets. After approaching the New York Times in 1971, Uwe Kohler's goal was to tell his mother's story as she saw it. According to Ilse, only the liberal courts in the United States treated her unfairly during her trial. The New York Times writers were eager to set the record straight about Ilse's deceitful statements to Uwe Kohler. The Americans, as we mentioned before, were quick to discount the reports as unreliable gossip. And it was the Germans who sentenced her to life behind bars. It didn't matter how many times he tried to get his mother's innocence published in a newspaper. Nobody believed him. Who exactly was her manipulation's last and greatest victim? Finally, the dark chapter of Buchenwald Bitch comes to a close. The story of this wicked enchantress serves as a chilling reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the indomitable spirit of survival. Their actions within the Nazi concentration camp were beyond comprehension, as they reveled in the sadistic theater of torture and murder. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, History Bazaar. And if you have any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts down below and let's continue the conversation. Thank you for watching.